It's a little bittersweet as I head into the final days with my 4790K build behind me there as my daily driver. But you know what? You gotta move on, and the components for that build will be serving a good purpose as they are reused in the rebuild of my home theater PC, with the motherboard possibly actually going into a completely different system. But all that set aside, before the X99 takes this bad boy's place, I got to thinking, I've got some benchmark numbers that I've run over the last year or so on this system. Most interesting, the GTX 970 and 970 SLI numbers from my ASUS 970 Strix. And I thought, you know what? I wasn't going to do a review on this, but I do have the 1070 Strix just waiting for the X99 build. So I figured, why not take a look at how this stacks up against the numbers I got from the 970? Since I already have them, let's do a little comparison. Let's have some fun. Why not? Hello everybody and welcome to Tech Uploaded. I am Chris as always, and I think the opening said it all. I already have the benchmark numbers for the 970. I've got a 1070, and I wasn't going to initially use this until after I was done with the X99 build, but I figured while I have these numbers as a baseline from the 970, why not throw the 1070 in here, have some fun, send the system out with some class, because right now it's got one of the graphics cards from the budget gaming AMD build in it. And, you know, run a last set of benchmarks against those benchmarks that I ran earlier and just have some fun with it. So the first thing to do is actually unbox this. Now, I just did a video unboxing a lot of the stuff for the X99 build, so I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail here, but I will get a little more technical with the card itself. Now, looking at the back of the box, as we saw earlier, it does have its direct CU3 system in there, so this is a departure from the standard stock heatsink cooler that you see on the Founders Edition. It has the Auto Extreme technology, the ASUS Aura lighting, all of that ASUS stuff that they like to throw in there. It's got the ASUS Fan Connect on there, which features two 4-pin GPU controlled headers that can be connected to the system fans, so you can kind of tweak it with your system cooling settings, and GPU tweak too, and they do give you 1 year of XSplit Broadcaster. And when I was doing the initial unboxing, I was trying to figure out why it said that there was a $100 value in here. That's what that is. It's that XSplit Broadcaster 1 year membership. So marketing hoopla aside, let's just get into this thing. This isn't going to be super fancy. This isn't going to be super formal. This is a fun video. This is playing around with what I already have to see what kind of numbers I can get, because I'm curious. I have to admit, I'm curious. And I put in a lot of legwork to get those 970 numbers, so why not throw a little more data into the pool? Why not, right? In case you didn't watch the other unboxing video, when you take out the main box, you have this box, another box, which is very plain, but clean and classy. And what I was really shocked by, not shocked, but pleasantly surprised by, was the presentation when you actually open the box is really quite nice. It's just this ASUS box here with a little bit of styrofoam next to it. And this just has your usual and customary things in there that tend to come with a graphics card, like the drivers and whatnot. I don't even remember all that's in there. I think there's some straps as well, some Velcro straps, but no one cares about that crap, right? Everybody wants to see the graphics card, and it's gonna get real crinkly. I told you it was gonna get crinkly. Woo! All right, so the 1070, there it is. Smells like a 1070, right? It has that nice electronic smell. There is a certain smell to that, right? It kind of has that smell like, you know, when there's electronics burning and you kind of know it. Kind of has that smell. Maybe that's a little disconcerting, I'm not sure. But anywho, it's a very nice graphics card. It feels sturdy. It does have that custom ASUS PCB going on right there. The 3 fans here, this is the exhaust into your system style of GPU, so you're not going to be blowing out the back of the case like you would with the blower style design. So do keep that in mind if you don't want to be dumping a bunch of heat into your computer. This is going to be the type of graphics card that does that, although the 10 series does tend to run a lot cooler, so you do have that going for you. Just aesthetically taking a look at the card itself before we get into any of the technical specifications, you can see here it is nice and long and beefy. It has very clearly defined fins and heat pipes for the actual cooling itself. It does have those 3 fans running along the top portion of the card itself. And then you can actually see along the card there are some kind of inlays here. This is where the LED lighting for that Aura lighting is going to come through on that portion of the card. You do have the Republic of Gamers logo, which I'm assuming also lights up. It's looking at it. And I believe that on the back plate, the actual ROG logo also lights up based on that aura lighting as well. So lots of lighting going on here, which kind of goes along with the motherboard that this is going to be running on and all that good stuff. So yay for LED lights, right? Because that's cool. We like things to light up. You know, as a kid, I had a bunch of Christmas lights in my basement, so maybe I am kind of drawn towards that kind of thing. I don't know. That all aside, the technical specifications for this card. There are actually two variants of this card out there. One of them that is more aggressively overclocked than this particular card. So this is the one that is less overclocked out of the box. This one comes in about $30 less than the more aggressive version of its of the card, but they both look pretty much identical. And actually, if you go onto ASUS's website and pull up both cards and scroll down, it's all of the same information. They're essentially the same thing, just with different profiles set to them. So what profile does this one come with? Well, good question. So first thing to note, when you get this card, it's going to come out of the box in gaming mode. That is how this is shipped, but you do have the option to do OC mode. So taking a look at my handy dandy notes here, out of the box, you're going to be in gaming mode, which means this is going to boost clock to 1683 megahertz with a base clock of 1506, which is pretty much the same as the Founders Edition. The OC mode, on the other hand, is going to boost clock up to 1721 megahertz, and it's going to have a base clock of 1531 megahertz. Now, the big boy brother of this actually boosts to over 1800 megahertz, so I'm actually going to see if I can get that kind of an overclock off of this card when I go to actually do the benchmarks for this thing. As far as connectivity on this bad boy goes, you do have one DVI-D port, two HDMI 2.0 ports, two standard size display ports, and yes, this is HDCP ready, so it does support that for any protected content going out to your television and whatnot. So all that exciting stuff aside, let me set this down before I end up doing something horrible to it. You do also have the SLI bridge connector on there and an 8-pin power, along with, I said, those two 4-pin fan connections. The dimensions, I'm going to give you in inches and centimeters because I'm just a nice guy like that. It is 11.73 by 5.28 by 1.57 inches in diameter. Of course, the longest number of that being the length of the card. And in centimeters, it is 29.8 by 13.4 by 4. So, all that said, time to get this bad boy in the computer, run the benchmarks, see what we come up with. I will be back after I run those, probably tomorrow, because let's face it, once I start running the benchmarks and playing with the overclocking, it's gonna turn into a gaming session. It just is, I know how I am. So, off to have some fun. Okay, so it is the next day and the benchmarks have been completed. One thing to keep in mind here, since I'm comparing the 1070 to the 970 and the 970 running an SLI, these benchmarks are the same benchmarks used for that, so they're a little bit old. It's kind of like my late 2014 set of benchmarks, so newer titles aren't going to be in here, and that's by design just because I wanted to have a comparison. This isn't really super scientific, it's just me being curious and kind of having fun with this card before this system is torn down and, you know, then this doesn't really, it's not really an option anymore. So before I look at the benchmark numbers, I want to run through like the GPU Tweak 2 software, kind of show how I did the benchmarking and how that works, and then also just give a quick overview of the ASUS Aura lighting software. I'm not going to get too into that because that's going to be more once I get the X99 build done, since that ASUS motherboard also takes advantage of that, and I kind of want to see how they work together with the Strix graphics card and the motherboard and all that stuff. So just kind of did a quick overview of that as well. So let's check that out first. Okay, so here's the ASUS GPU Tweak 2 software, and you can see there's a lot going on here. You do have some historical data here on the left. You have this little monitor going on, which is really handy. And the nice thing about this is not only does it give you about like the last 5 minutes or so when you scrub back, you know, through here. Let's see, 34, let's see, that's 5 minutes there, 6, 7, maybe 7 minutes or so. But it gives you a lot of really handy information if you want to be able to track kind of what was going on while you were gaming. So say you had a session happening, it's really hot in the room, you got a bunch of stuff in your case, it's a real small case, and you want to know if things are thermal throttling. This is where you would be able to check that. If you want to know how your overclock is doing. This is where you would check that. And actually the nice thing is this keeps historical data, all the way back to basically since I loaded it at this point. So I can see that the maximum my GPU clock has ever boosted was 1962 megahertz. The warmest the card has ever gotten has been 67 degrees, and the fastest that the fans have been spinning up has been 1701 RPMs. So that kind of stuff is really nice to know. It also shows your memory clock. Over here, you've got your different profiles. So out of the box, you're going to ship in gaming mode, and that's just a nice balance of silence, coolness, and performance. Obviously, OC mode is going to bump a little bit more onto the GPU clock to get your performance up. Silence mode is going to reduce the GPU clock a little bit to keep the fans from spinning up quite as much. And then you can switch over to your profiles, and they're not really going to show anything here, but that we will look at shortly. And then you can turn the fans onto 0 decibel mode, which I believe actually just turns the fans off. Now, if you go into professional mode, here you can see in gaming mode, it's not really going to do anything. It's just going to be at the 1683 megahertz boost clock that it's shipping at out of the box, and it's not applying anything extra. It's not applying any extra voltage or power, I should say. The voltage doesn't ever seem to really change. At least I don't notice it doing much. You can also set your target frame rate, your target GPU temperature. If you don't want it to go above a certain temperature, this is where it would start thermal throttling and cutting things back a little bit on the clock. You have your power target, which will go up as you start adding more. For instance, if you go into OC mode, you can see that it adds another 10% to the power target to add 38 megahertz to take you up to 1721. And then I have, here's silent mode, by the way. Let's click on that. You can see it reduces it by 38. And then I have a mode in here called Max OC, where I just took this slider, cranked it all the way to the right, took it up to 1767. Let's go ahead and apply that. I'm also at 112% on the target. And I'm actually going to load up Unigine Valley, and I will run that in window mode at 1920 by 1080. And we will see what we boost to on the GPU clock. Initially jumps to 1506, which is the standard. And now we're boosting to 1949. So you can see I'm set at 1767, but we're actually getting 1949 on the GPU clock. So that is interesting. One thing I did notice, let me go ahead and pull over the Valley benchmark here just so we can kind of see it. Let's move this. Graphics memory seems to be reading at 4 gigabytes in a lot of different benchmark applications that I've been using, especially older ones. But I did check in the NVIDIA control panel, and it does say that there is 8 gigabytes of memory on here, but this reads 4 gigabytes for whatever reason. It is showing at 1987 megahertz on the clock and a temperature of 60. So it's a little higher in what Unigine is showing than what the GPU Tweak 2 software is showing, but temperatures are spot on. So we're between 59 and 60, pushing this really, really, high overclock on here as far as this card goes. And it's very warm in this room. So that's actually very impressive that the fan speed staying as low as it is. I can barely hear it. Those 3 fans do a good job of keeping the air moving without letting the card get loud. Now we're hitting about 60 degrees. The maximum I've had this hit was 67 during, the full benchmark, onslaught that I had going. But overall, the software is just super easy to use and really handy. So you can set it to boot by default with the system. It's really great. And like I said, being able to have that historical data is really handy if you want to know what your system is doing when you're actually gaming, especially if you don't have a dual monitor setup, because I tend to just kind of leave this on the right screen while I'm gaming. That way I can see what the system's up to, but now you can see that the clock is dropping back down again. But if I wanted to scrub backwards and say, at 3:30 this was running, at 3:38 this was at 1949. So you can kind of go back and take a look at all that stuff. So there you go. It's super easy to use. You get a nice, good overclock going. No fuss, no muss. That is the GPU Tweak 2 software. Okay, and then the last thing to check out here is the Aura graphics card software that comes with this. And this basically controls the LED on the side of the card where it says Republic of Gamers, the LED on the top of the card with the backplate, which is basically this logo right here, and then, the ROG logo, and then the lighting on the bottom of the card, which you really don't see in most systems. So you have options here. And I'm not going to go too much into this other than just kind of showing how the software works until I actually do the X99 build, because then this should, in theory, also control the lighting on that motherboard as well. But you can turn them off if you want to do that. That's always an option if you just don't want LEDs. And then you can turn them back on, obviously. You can do static, which is what I'm going to stick with. And then you can actually change the colors. So I'm actually going to go over to kind of this shade here and then hit apply. And that changes the color now to match the kind of, you know, color aesthetic going on inside my computer right now, because I do have those blue LEDs in there. So you can also set it to breathe. So then the card kind of pulses, which is what it is on default. Strobe, I haven't tried yet, but I imagine that that's going to be annoying. It very much is annoying. It blinks. And then color cycle, I suppose, will just kind of keep cycling through different colors, which is what it looks like it's doing. Again, really kind of distracting. Special effects, you can do it to music, or you can actually, this one's pretty handy, really. If your system tends to get really hot, you can actually set it to represent the temperature of the card itself. And if the card starts getting too hot, then the LEDs in the card will actually start to get more, you know, towards that red zone and say, hey, this card's getting a little hot, you might want to back off. But, you know, I haven't had any problems with the card getting hot, so I'm just going to go back to this setting here and kind of leave it at that. But again, this just applies to the graphics card. I'm looking forward to using this once I get the motherboard and everything going to see how well all of these things work together. But yes, there is the Aura settings for the GTX 1070 Strix edition. So as you can see, the software is super easy to use, very straightforward. Pretty much operates exactly as it did with my 970. Okay, benchmark time. Enough delay. Let's check out the benchmark. So I put the Strix 1070 in its max overclock up against the EVGA. I've got it up on the screen here, 970 superclock. The ASUS Strix 970s running an SLI, and then the PNY 780 Ti overclocked, and that was a reference design card. So let's take a look. And the benchmarks fared pretty much how I expected them to. The 1070 scored very well, beating out the 970 in pretty much almost every circumstance, and actually beating out the 780 Ti on some titles as well, which was interesting, especially like Tomb Raider, where it really jumped quite a bit ahead. And it actually held its own against the 970s and SLI in some titles. Now, it did kind of get it handed to itself by the 970s on things that were very well optimized for SLI. But overall, the 1070 did really, really well. And for 1440p gaming, with everything cranked up, I think this card's going to be just fine, especially on like a 60 hertz display where, you know, 60 frames per second is kind of your target. I think this is going to be great. This is going to be, you know, just what I needed, because I was falling still a little short of that with just one 970. The 970s and SLI in optimized titles were fantastic, but titles that weren't optimized, not so much. So having just a single card solution for 1440p gaming is really nice. I'm looking forward to having this card in the X99 system as well. It may actually not perform quite as well in the X99 as it does in here, even though this card isn't, or this CPU isn't overclocked. It does run at stock at 4 gigahertz. So the clock speed of the 4970K in gaming may actually give it a little bit of an advantage depending on the overclock I'm able to get off of the Broadwell-E chip I'm using. But, you know, I don't think it'll be a huge difference. But all that said, I like the build quality of the card. It's quiet. There's no coil whine. The software is very easy to use. It is big, so keep that in mind. It's a very big card. But yeah, it's a 1070, and it performs like I would expect it to. Overclocking it, like I said, super easy to do. And temperatures are staying nice and cool. So I think it looks good. I think it has a nice aesthetic design, and hopefully we'll go with the build. There is one out now that is like white, so it goes with the new like series of motherboards from ASUS, like the X99A2 that I'm going to be using. But I actually kind of prefer this one, especially with that really cool backplate and just, you know, the big beefiness of the card. I like big graphics cards, and this one actually doesn't really sag even in this motherboard, so that's kind of a nice bonus. I really expected it to be like pulling down, and it doesn't. So yeah, I didn't think I was going to be doing a formal review on this card, but hey, why not? You know, it's here. We'll do it. I'm still waiting on some of the components for the final build, so I'm glad I was able to have the opportunity to play around with this and kind of do some comparison numbers against the benchmarks that I already had. So you know the drill. If you enjoyed this video, please go ahead and click on that subscribe button. You can also follow me on social media over on Twitter and Instagram as Tech Uploaded. There is a Tech Uploaded Facebook page, and of course you can shoot me an email at techuploaded@gmail.com. And you know the drill. Don't be a stranger. Check back soon.